So I think the first question might be, why this topic, why this setting, why this story, why this particular moment?
Sure.
Did you choose to write?
I've always enjoyed novels about the Civil War and around the Civil War. I mean, from, The Known World by Edward B. Jones, Beloved After the Civil War by Toni Morrison, and I always wanted to contribute to that canon, but I didn't really know how. But I was reading the oral histories of freed slaves, and just kind of learning about that moment immediately after they were freed, and what that was like for them. And I had never seen that put down in fiction before, and written about. Perhaps it hasn't, but I hadn't experienced that. It felt like a very heavy topic. That was maybe too much for a debut novelist in a way. So I sort of I just kind of said, I'm not gonna. I should write about something I know better, but it just kept coming up in my mind, and eventually I said, if no one else can tell the story, I should tell the story. So I just tried to make it happen, and this is the result here. This is what I came up with. Yeah.
And I wonder if you could talk about navigating this sort of genre, maybe I would even call it a heavy genre of historical fiction. So I think your initial impulse to say, oh, maybe not, is what a lot of people might have done.
Yeah.
So how did you balance that historical accuracy, if you even think about that kind of thing, and then creating this story, helping us learn more about the African American experience? It seems to me that's kind of a hard thing to do.
Very, yeah. I think first and foremost, you want to do justice to the history of the moment. So you do want to get it right. But at the same time, you don't want the story to be overwhelmed by this feeling of you've gotten the logistics and all of the historical details perfect, because that's not what fiction is about. So that is a priority, but at the same time, for me, the priority are the characters. I want to do justice to these freedmen. I want to do justice to these characters who are in this community. And if I can come at each of them and put them on the page in a way that is empathetic, in a way that really feels like I understand them, and I've fleshed out who they are. Mm-hmm. And if I feel like that will be passed on to the reader in that same way, then I've done my job, and I think I can carry them along in the story, in the historical details.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking of Beloved, for instance, which has all this historical information. I'm sorry about the flood. But maybe more importantly than the historical information, you can feel the raw pain or suffering, or empathize with the characters. Whereas I've read many historical novels where they're working so hard to recreate the period about the actual story and connecting with real people, it just gets lost in the shuffle.
I know. Sometimes the real humans, fiction or not, you sort of feel them, being lost in this. Again, that overarching historical feeling. Obviously, Toni Morrison is a master at it. That doesn't happen. Not on level every good thing. But you just do your best with it. And again, it's that sense of empathy, it's that sense of, in a sense, I don't know, I just try to put myself in their shoes, and whether that fails or succeeds is up to the reader. I'm so glad to hear that a lot of readers have found that, I was able to do that on some level.
Right.
And connecting with that trauma, to speak on that, that's one of the most difficult parts of it. In the book, Landry has gone through a lot as a slave. And that trauma makes it so he can't speak, it makes it so he can't connect with others. And at some point my editor wanted more from Landry, more from Brother Prentice. And my first instinct was to say, I'm not doing that. Because I just didn't want to enter their psyches again. That was just too much for me.
Yeah.
But at some point I realized the story needed it, so I did it. But it does take a toll on you as an author. But I feel like the characters deserve it and the readers deserve it as well. So you have to put it in there.
Yeah. Landry is a fascinating character because he seems to absorb so much suffering, almost for other people. I was reminded of Tom and Harry Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, where he's almost sort of like this Christ-like figure. I wonder if you had something like that in mind, or why is it that Landry endures so much?
I don't know. I feel like almost the tropes of the genre make it good. Like you're saying in Uncle Tom's Cabin, make it feel that way, but. There was a time when I didn't even enter his head and his perspective. And the reason I did was because I felt like he was becoming that. And once I was able to enter into his psyche and, create his narrative, there are so many complexities to him. His relationship with nature, his feelings about his brother, his feelings about the threat of freedom, the want of freedom, that's all there. It's just that he can't express it in the same way. And that was my goal, by speaking from his perspective. And his relationship with his brother. I feel like that does evolve that sense for him. But,
yeah.
He takes a lot of pain, but, Prentice takes a lot of pain, and a lot of the characters do.
Right.
So it is spread out a bit. But yeah, he has a rough go of things, I'll give you that much.
Yeah. And maybe I'm mischaracterizing it because I think in some ways Tom is sort of an archetype, whereas Landry is not, and you've developed him.
Sure, but not mischaracterizing it, but it's interesting to hear different readers come to the book and connect or think about different characters in that way. People sympathize with different people. The first person they want to bring the story and talk about, it's always satisfying who they bring up. And that was one of my goals with the book, is to create a book where, I don't know, all these characters have a point that people can connect with them on. So I've always found that as a fascinating part of the experience of being here.
And while we're talking about characters, I'm fascinated by the character of Caleb and his homosexual affair with August. I think it's important that you have that in the story, because so often these relationships are erased. But it's complicated to write about people with same-sex desires. It's a time when the word homosexual doesn't exist, the word gay doesn't exist. And as I think I told you earlier, I kept reading Caleb as effeminate. Like he always struggled. People were always talking about him as too soft, too weak, or too feminine, or not fitting in. And he's bullied by children. And I don't know, that sort of resonated with me because that's something I studied, right? The history of sexuality. So sure. I wonder if you could talk about that. I found that really interesting. Interesting part of the book.
Yeah. While you're writing, you're not thinking, as you would think as a reader, he seems. For me, it came from a place of George is so distant. Isabel is, so protective of him.
Right.
And it felt to me that that's the relationship. That's just how he would be in a way. And you develop that bit chapter by chapter. So I don't know. In terms of presenting on the book at all, I don't know. I wanted to use the opportunity of writing historical fiction to center characters that you don't find in that time period that often. And I just had not seen a gay relationship, in the historical fiction I had read coming from the church or Civil War novels. So. As with the whole book, I didn't know if that was something I could take on, but don't know, I just felt like it deserved to be there, and it was coming up naturally in the novel from the very first chapter, in relationship with August. And I didn't know where that would go, but that's where it ended up, and I wasn't going to shy away from that.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting. And you're right. I don't think these relationships are very well documented.
Yeah.
At all. Even now. And certainly not in historical novels.
But it exists.
Exactly.
It had to exist, you know? So it's like, I don't know, it shouldn't be ignored, you know?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be added into the canon of historical fiction just for that.
Yeah.
It should be added for that.
And maybe the reason I keep talking about Caleb as a feminine is I'm sort of looking at him through the 19th century lens,
Yeah.
where people's identity would be determined by gender behavior, not sexual experience. And I think you could see that with August, who doesn't suffer in the same way at all. Doesn't seem to. We don't really get in his head, but he doesn't seem to.
Yeah, I mean, the novel, I like to think, is dealing with a lot of these ideas that are intersecting. And I think a lot of what shields August is his family. And you know, the Webbler family in the novel, you know, runs the town of Old Ox. You know, they have the real estate. And I think on some level, his father shields him from a lot. You know, and we can all think of how that plays out in our lives. That privilege allows you to behave as you want to, and there's not going to be consequences. So, I think that's part of it.
Yeah, that's sort of the privilege, class privilege, or whatever it is, where August is just used to getting everything he wants.
Sure.
Yeah. So one review of the book talked about in terms of that you were trying to address the question or grapple with the question, what does freedom mean? I don't know, were you thinking about that? I mean, this is such an interesting time when Landry and Princess are free for the first time, although of course somebody like the town police, they weren't having any part of it. I mean, they were trying to just continue on as if nothing had changed. And it happened in many places. But they're able to kind of step out of it somewhat.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, can you talk about that a little bit? This sort of moment of emancipation, we're trying to claim freedom.
Yeah. I can assure you that when I started the novel, I wasn't sitting there daydreaming, what does freedom mean? Yeah, because I don't think I would have even started the novel at that point. That would have been too much, you know.
Right.
But no, I think it means something different for each character. In some ways I can't even describe, but I look at them and, of course, the brothers, you know, Prentice and Landry. As I kind of mentioned before, freedom is this, what they've been seeking their whole lives, and it's also this threat of not knowing that each step could lead to something disastrous, as, you know, it does. In some ways, you read the book.
Right.
Isabel, George's wife, I mean, I think she feels cloistered, numb in her, you know, her position in it as George's wife, and George's at the time, and she's sort of stuck there, and she finds her way as the novel progresses. And George is this outsider, and he's always trying to find a sense of who he is. He's always on this pursuit. So, I don't know. I just think it's like how it is for any of us. You know, we're all trying to find this next thing for us, and this idea of freedom, you know, all the time. But, I mean, of course, at the end of the day, it was focused on the brothers.
Right.
And I feel like all the other characters, I don't know, the brothers are like magnets in this community. Not everybody else is reacting to them, and we see how that can lead to unfortunate ends.
Yeah,
Because, you know, they're doing exactly what everybody else wants them not to do.
I mean, when it appears that Prentice is going to be hanged, I mean, what did he do exactly? spit at the man running the town, basically.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was it. But in that moment, I mean, from what I recall writing it, that represents to him this moment of freedom. It's this moment that, like, he's willing to risk his life to have this violent attack on, this person who holds so much over him. And in that moment, when he's feeling that passion, he's willing to do it. He's willing to take it.
Yeah.
You could really blame him.
I'm reminded of Emmett Till in 1955. I think he did less. He didn't spit. He whistled or said, "Hey, baby," or something like that. Yeah.
If that, yeah.
So I wonder if the audience has any questions, anything you'd be interested in asking.
I don't see the book, but I was going to ask Nathan if he could read, just fresh it.
I don't.
No.
I don't. No, sorry. I'm so sorry. For me, it's like a performance. I don't know.
Well, it's like, I like to hear the voice. But don't do it.
To me, in a way, it's not my voice.
Oh, okay. It is a performance if you're going to get the voice.
It's a performance on the page. You know, in each character. We were talking about readings earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like when readers meet these characters and meet the story, I want their immersion in the world to be total. And maybe I'm sort of weird curious for that.
No, that's not. We had someone else that was like that too. And sometimes if that's you're good at doing that, but then I'm going to go to another question. This isn't about the book, but it's about you being like not that long out of the missionary program, and you're published and you're on Oprah Winfrey. And if you could just talk a little bit about that experience and then detail about it. Like on all things Oprah, that David already knows that. But yeah, of course, but just how did, I know, like, I've been following you, that's how come we, like we knew to invite you and everything, but when I saw you with Oprah, I was like, Dad, you're so young.
Yeah.
And so if you could just address both, they kind of tie in. Is that okay?
Of course. Just talking about the Oprah experience?
Well, I want to put first, that's a big, just getting published at
29, 30.
Yeah.
No, I mean.
And like that experience and tied into Oprah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, when you're writing any book, you're in this galaxy that's literally just you and these characters you're creating, and then it was just surreal to have this moment where you start sending it out, and you have all these. It's like in my mind, the galaxy's a little planets, like ... It's like turning white, like stars, and all these people who are liking it and connecting with you, and then all of a sudden it's like, and you have a whole universe of readers, and it just kind of took off. And I always saw myself kind of having a short rise, and in its way, it was very quick. And I just had this very bizarre experience where there was another book club that was interested, and they told me that that's not going to happen. Something's happening. Something else is happening. And I was 100% certain I did some awful thing. I was like, what did I do? Like, how did I ruin this somehow? And I'm pacing around my house and stuff. And then, at some point I got a phone call. I didn't know who it was. I didn't pick up. And then I looked at a text, and it had, this black woman with hair. And it was like, hey, this is Oprah. I'd love to talk to you. And, I was like, if this is really Oprah, I'd be happy to chat. And she says, it is. I'm going to unblock my number again. So please pick up. And I picked up. And, it's talk about surreal, because she talks to you like she could be in the back of the room right now. She's just a big fan of books, and she's talking about, this line. And then I got to Prentice's line here, and this paragraph here. And she was asking all these questions. She goes, but don't answer. We're going to do this for the interview. The interview? We're going to have an interview? And she tells you that you got picked for the club, And everything went from there. And, you go out to California and meet her, and she's the nicest person in the world. And again, this is just something that she doesn't have to do this. She loves it. She's this ginormous literary citizen who's given so much to literature and Black literature, and it was a blessing to get that chance to.
Did your life change after that, or just?
I mean,
like the book sales or whatever the experience that changed. How, in what way did it change what was already going on?
No, I mean that's all great, but the truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, I wake up and just me in my apartment, and I go sit down with my coffee, and I'm writing just like I did before Oprah, and then you got moments like this where you're talking to people, and they, there is this other side where all that did happen, but I try to, maintain this private part of me that's just me and the work. So I don't know. It's a strange duality, but it's impossible to say my life is the same as it was pre-Oprah. Free the sweetness of water, and that's all for the best.
I guess, yeah, go ahead, because I would ask another.
Please, yeah, whatever you guys want to know.
So I can only assume that that's a product of your time with the Mission Center.
Mostly, yeah. I started it, the first chapter, it was actually going to be a short story at the University of Oregon, but almost all of it was at the Mission Center.
Do you major in something else first?
Center, yes.
I'm sorry.
You guys one at a time, please.
Go ahead, Susan.
So my question is, so we've been in several panels today where people have talked about their experiences in our MFA programs, and I would say the majority of the conversations have sort of tended toward inhibiting as opposed to being a kind of a positive, creative process. So could you, Mission Center may be a different experience, but could you tell us a little bit about how that creative work was in an MFA program, how that influenced you or changed or limited you or didn't or what?
I mean, so much of an MFA program, to me, in my experience, are just the instructors and, the limitations of it. I mean, the fact that the Mission Center, you don't have to teach, you don't have to do anything except work on your work. I mean, that's huge in and of itself. But Brad Anthony Johnston, Elizabeth McCracken, I mean, these were, writers and instructors who saw my book for what it was. And they're, first and foremost, they wanted it to be the best product of the version of what I wanted it to be. And I always felt like they shared that vision. So I don't know. I also feel like, had I written another book that maybe I didn't have as strong of a handle on, not to say I'm great at writing historical fiction, it could have been historical fiction too, I just wasn't quite there with that one. It could have gone in a whole different direction, because you get one piece of advice that sends it off in this other way, that can change everything. So I think I was lucky. I think there's a level of luck in this, whether it be the Mission Center or anything. But I had a fantastic time there, and I would suggest anybody who gets into the Mission Center, they should go. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
It does? Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
One positive for MFA programs.
Yeah. Oh, come on. It helps. You learn stuff,
I enjoyed my experience.
Yeah. Good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I also had a question. I know you mentioned this sort of briefly at the beginning, but sort of your process in developing the historical background for the book. So I think you talked a little bit about reading some primary documents very briefly at the beginning. So I was just sort of wondering about that.
Yeah. I read, it's awful because I read those documents really early on. I always tell, writers and writing programs that the most important thing about writing fiction really is just curiosity. You should always just be curious, always trying to be fun, discovering new stuff that you didn't know about because you don't know what to lead to. And I had just happened upon, again, these documents that was the oral histories from freed people talking about that moment when they were freed. And I don't know where it came from, because what happened was I was reading it and I was like, I don't want this to get in the way of my writing. Like, my mind immediately was like, oh my God, this feels like I need to dig into this, So I actually clicked out, but Yeah, I also go back to, I always discuss how, and this might be powerful, Edward P. Jones, Writing the Known World, he, from what they say, he was researching for 10 years for that. And it's just these big books of, historical documents. And the only way he started it was by throwing it all away. And he decided that I know enough about this at this point. I might get some stuff wrong, but I have to focus on the story, So he put it all aside and he wrote The Known World and won his Pulitzer Prize, and the rest is history. And that just really meant a lot to me. So it was like, I always, putting aside those initial documents I read, whenever there was a moment where I felt like, okay, these people are entering this room, I literally don't know what this room would look like. That's kind of important. I would look it up and find out and get enough. But I also realized that, you don't have to know the sort of gilt buttons they had on, their jackets or whatnot. Again, the story is the priority. So always trying to do enough historical research to make it authentic, do justice to the time period, but you can add. Never take away, but you can always add. That's kind of the rule I like to follow.
Yeah.
If you researched and researched like a historian would, that could just snuff out the story and the creativity.
And it does.
There's no more room left.
Yeah.
I have a question, kind of building on Catherine's question. Did you have characters talking to you during this process?
Yeah, more than talking to me. I think that's one thing that I wasn't prepared for in publishing the book is I wrote it for 2.5, 3 years, and then you kind of think that's it. And then there's all this time of editing it. And I always kind of talk about how I literally felt like the characters were in my apartment, and I was kind of walking around. I was like, okay, yeah, you can go now. I'm actually ready for the next book, the next story. We're not done yet. So yeah, they're always around, and I'm a big believer in a lot of writing. I don't do that much writing every day, but a lot of writing is just, brushing your teeth, thinking about the book, you're taking a shower, you're at the gym, whatever it is. And those characters stick with you. They stick with you longer than you would imagine. And it's worth it, because if you find that one little kernel that you need to go back to chapter 2 or chapter 3 and add in, that's, I'm happy to have them in my house, I guess. If they can give something to make the book good enough that, readers are enjoying it. So, yeah.
Sorry.
So I was just going to say I found your novels to be such a masterful mix of plot and character. I've read a lot of character studies recently that are fairly plotless, and I love them for that reason. Many novels sacrifice character for the sake of action or moving the plot, but I found your novel to be such an interesting and so well done mix of the two. So I guess my question here being, did you find one of those two harder? Did you find it harder to craft your characters or harder to figure your plot out? Or was there, was one a little bit easier than the other? How did you come to that?
Both are really hard. And both should be hard, because if it's going to be good, it should be hard, and it's a matter of, rationing it out so you don't let it overwhelm you. I always say, I try to just make contact with the work every day, something Jonathan Latham writes about. So I never put the pressure on myself that I have to be writing 500 words, or I have to work on this plot point is just wrong right now. It'll all come together in time. So it's like this day might be about, working on the plot, but this other day, or again, if I'm brushing my teeth, I'm just thinking about what should Prentice be thinking in this moment, actually, because that didn't really seem like him. And if that takes 2 years or 10 years, it still comes together if you're working on it and you're thinking about it every day, no matter how busy life gets. Just be present with the story, and the characters, and the plot will reveal itself, and all of those knots will, unravel over time. Hopefully, or not. I don't know. I guess you put it aside for something else. I can't promise.
So I kind of take it, I think I've heard some authors say they're huge outliners and they know where their plot goes, before they really start writing the bulk of their novel, and other authors, kind of say, I'll just see where the plot takes me. I assume you're in that latter category, or
No.
do you have that plot sense?
I think people just go where the plot takes them, that seems totally psychotic to me. Something wrong with them. I'm joking. No, I'm a deep believer in this. I don't have a percentage, like a 70-30 rule. I like to know about 70% of the plot, so I have an idea of where I'm going with it. But you need that 30%, so it doesn't feel like you're so constricted by it. It's all set in place. Because the 30% is really the characters on some level deciding what they want to do based off what just happened. So, yeah, I do outline to an extent. I just try not to, keep it to like a paragraph, something like that.
Are you on to the next?
Yeah, that was what I was about to ask.
Yeah, on to the next one. I'm about halfway through. It's historical fiction as well. Similar time period, but it has some differences. I followed the Tobias Wolff idea of if you speak with the word, it hardens, cracks and breaks apart. So we're gonna keep it fluid right now. I don't know exactly where it's going, but so far I'm confident. But I've been confident before with stories. They always surprise you. So
Yeah, they do.
let's hope it keeps together. Yeah.
I know when I was on to the second novel, what you said about the character still staying with you.
Yeah.
And my first novel, the character's name was Sarah, and this one is Ruthie Mae. But I keep calling Ruthie Mae Sarah because she just.
She's still in your house with you.
Yeah.
A ghost in your
Yeah, it
house.
takes a long time so I should, I guess maybe never.
And that's okay. These people, they come to matter to you in a way. They're your people, your creations, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Did you just kind of fall into historical, like, I know you kind of talked about it, and now you're doing it again. For me, it was kind of like, it wasn't what it sort of selected me.
Yeah.
Would you want to talk about the process?
Sure,
of that?
no.
How did that?
Like I said with the first book, I felt like, there was this period I just hadn't seen in fiction. And I feel like with the second book too, I'm getting into different countries and different, just different sorts of people that I haven't seen put on the page in historical fiction too much. But I'll also say this, after this one, I'm done. Because you know what?
It takes.
It's like, as I tell people, when they're getting from point A to point B, at some point, writing about the carriage and how the carriage works, and I just want to use a car, maybe a plane, that'd be nice, just like, they drove there,
When you're done with the historical fiction, not writing.
Oh yeah. I hope not, you never know. Maybe that'll be a good publicity trick. The early retirement, I'll get people to.
Yeah.
Because I imagine when you write about the present, it's different. You make assumptions, and as I've often said, historians often like bad novelists because they help us see what was going on at that moment.
Sure. Which makes sense, but what I like about historical fiction, why I think the thing is about is connecting with people is because it does, the past echoes, to the present. And the book is, dealing with a lot of what we're dealing with now in terms of race and class and how people in our own community are, like us but so different, and, the way that we're all, challenging one another. And I don't know, I feel like with historical fiction, with writing a contemporary novel, there's just a pressure to it, because we're all living in it. And historical fiction allows you to deal with these issues, but give the reader some space, and so they can kind of be like, make these connections to the present, but see it in the past. And I don't know, I like to think that's enriching in a way. And it's not so overwhelming to readers.
All the way through the book, I kept writing, still relevant, still germane, still relevant. And I think this country hasn't really, until maybe the last decade, hasn't really come to terms with this history.
No.
So books like this, I think, help them.
if it helps at all, then I've done my part, and that makes me very happy out there. So, yeah.
What are you reading right now?
I don't know that too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Let's pique your interest recently.
what am I reading right now? Well, right now I'm reading a book by a Swedish author, Dag Solstad. It's called Armand V. It's about this small town ambassador. He's a great writer. I just read Assembly by, I believe, Natasha Hall or Brown? Yeah, Natasha Brown.
So good.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, slender novel. I love reading novels like that are so different from anything I would ever write, but so beautiful. It's, oddly expansive in its way. It deals with so much, even though it's so short. There's one black woman's life in the UK, right?
Yes, yeah. Yep.
Dealing with a cancer diagnosis. All sorts of stuff. Yeah, beautiful book. So, and then Punch Me Up to the Gods by Brian Broom. It's just a fantastic memoir. I don't read a lot of memoirs, but that one floored me. So those are 2 or 3 that I would recommend. Yeah.
Do you read a lot of historical fiction, or is that kind of a separate,
It's a good question.
I'm writing it, so therefore I'm reading other things that are different.
The problem is I love historical fiction, but I do feel that way. I do feel like I'm doing it, so then I'll kind of see what they're up to, Maggie Sheep said she was on the short list for the Great Circle. I felt that a lot in that book, and I was kind of I was seeing these sort of similarities in structure and stuff, and it kind of took me out of it, but I could also see that it was such a marvelous novel. And I'm kind of how is she doing it so well? I'm kind of envious in a way, so I think sometimes when I'm in the midst of writing a chapter, I'll avoid it, but like right now I just finished a chunk of my book, and it's now I can maybe I'll go pick up something like that and just kind of dig in.
What time period is this when you're writing?
It's right after Reconstruction too, yeah. So it's honestly the same, which is crazy because I never thought I would do that, But I don't know. There's also an element to it where I found these characters that were calling out to me, and I also have this real childlike feeling where I would read a book and I would just love it. You're staying up all night, you're reading it, and then you offer this wildly different thing, and I would be I just kind of wanted a little bit more of that. Not like a sequel. I know people do want a sequel. I don't think I was ever going to do that, but it's kind of if people enjoyed this book and they love historical fiction, and I have a story I feel that is calling out to me, why would I purposefully avoid it? I do want to have that relationship with the readers, and I don't know, if there's a kid out there who has a feeling like I did, this is a way to pay it back. So, I don't know.
So you'll have fans that follow you.
I hope. Yeah, that's the plan.
I like his stuff. Well, I never did until I decided to write it.
Sure.
And just 60s, not. But also, I was it's more a statement than a question. And you said you're going to quit after this, and I thought the same thing, so I set the book in 2017, the one I'm working on now. An incident that happened, but on the way back to slavery already, so.
It's all right, hey.
It's when you try to say, why did this happen? Why are they acting out the way that they're acting out now? You end up. So I don't know if it's going to be so easy to give up.
Hey, don't think you're on the muse. Just wherever she leads you, that's where you go.
They'll all be historically informed.
Yeah. Yes.
What element of fiction, character, or she acts sort of as that? But what are you most drawn? I'm drawn to the voice, capturing the voice of the character. What are you most drawn to? Or are you most drawn to?
I guess the story comes first for me. For what I'm writing now, it's first person, and I think I've gotten a lot of questions about this novel that the third person voice is very sort of I don't know, sort of grandfatherly sort of, and it's old fashioned, and this character that I'm writing now, his voice is entirely different, but it felt like the story required that. So I had to sort of enter the voice of this person who is so different from me. He's a butler, effectively. A freed slave who has become a butler. The same job he had before, which leads to all sorts of stuff. But kind of speaks to this high way. So I like the challenge of saying, being like, okay, this is the idea I have, and I have to find a way to solve it. It's almost a problem for me. So whether that's character or plot, I don't know. There's an element to me. I guess like naive arrogance of feeling like I'm the writer who can just do it, And I know it'll fail me at some point, but
Not sure.
it's if you're not taking a risk of failure, what are we doing? I think that's a big part of it. Jonathan Safran Foer said, I'm not interested in successes, but really terrific failures. I kind of like that, Although I'd rather have success.
Easy for you to say.
It's the risk. It's the risk of the failure that I think is good to take on. So
Yeah.
I'm willing to do